Hi, I'm David Korn.
And I'm Jim Pinkerton.
Together,
we're bloggingheads.tv. Back yet again.
And Jim, I have to say, I'm quite surprised and feel quite fortunate to have your attention today because in 2 days, something rather major is happening in your life.
On June 7th, I am getting married. I'm quite excited. And
now, this is number one for you?
Number two,
but it's been a while, right?
I'm going to make this one work.
But it's been a long time since
it has been a long time.
One.
Yes, exactly. So I feel very fortunate.
Well, the whole Blogging Heads community sends their warm regards to you and yours, and you picked just a great time to get married. We have like a little pause in the presidential race for a couple of days.
Exactly. I mean, Obama and Hillary have agreed to kind of get off the news for a little bit so that I can, to have the front page of the Washington Post to myself on Sunday.
Yes. I'll be looking for that 3,000-word piece. But we do know on the front page of the Washington Post Sunday there will be a story that says Hillary finally is out of the race. Well, sort of. Right. After all this, after extending the soap opera another day or two by refusing to concede on Tuesday night after Obama clinched the nomination, she then quickly, I think, somewhat as a result of the pressure she got, said that she'd hold a big rally or big unity event on Saturday, and she's not going to release her delegates as far as we know at this point, but she will acknowledge the obvious, the reality that Obama is the nominee and pledge to support him, and then it's on to Denver, one happy Democratic family.
Well, that sums it up to me. What else is there to be said?
No.
I mean, I don't know, David. The big question in Washington, of course, is whether Hillary will use her 2,000 or so delegates and her 18 million votes to try and force her way onto the ticket. And it looks to me, as a Republican observer, a little bit on the outside, that's exactly what she intends on doing.
That may be her intent. I think the Obama campaign and others are saying basically now, let's just cool it for a moment. And the Clinton campaign, if that's what it is, for this, to be running mate here for Barack Obama, is really on the border of looking rather unseemly. She has to, too, worry about her future in the Democratic Party because there's no reason to believe she doesn't have a very bright future ahead of her, maybe even a very bright future should Obama lose to McCain on November 4th. So I think the notion, trying to push her way on, if it's seen that way, is not going to be to her benefit. So there's been a lot of conflicting signals coming from her camp. There are people close to her. Who knows if they're doing this with her permission? People like Lanny Davis, Robert Johnson, head of the Black Entertainment Television, who are making a very concerted push to get her on the ticket. So I think this may sort itself out, and the heat may turn down on this in the next couple of days because it's quite clear that Obama's appointed this veep vetting committee headed by Caroline Kennedy. Then they're going to take their time and not make any, I think, quick decisions. And can you just imagine the vetting process for Bill Clinton? I mean, because, listen, if you're going to put him on the ticket, there are some real questions. Okay, will you tell us who's giving funding to your library? Will you tell us what deals you have in Kazakhstan? I mean, those are things that reporters like myself and others have been asking throughout the campaign and have been, getting stonewalled on. Well, you can't really do that if you want to be vice president.
Yeah, all of a sudden the Democrats sound like Ken Starr. They really want to know the truth about Bill Clinton.
There have been some Democrats asking a lot of questions, and to me, what you're doing with the Kazakhstan billionaire is probably more important than what you did with an intern. But,
fair enough, but I also think that Bill Clinton hurt himself badly with this whole Vanity Fair business.
Listen, this guy he was hailed, and perhaps rightly so, as the greatest politician of our current generation here when he was in office, and as a great political strategist. And I think that was probably right, but he's really lost his touch. Maybe it's because of health reasons. Someone I heard the other day say, listen, when he ran for president, this internet, this thing of tubes and wires, wasn't as important. And you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have, everything posted immediately. You didn't have citizen journalists. and he just really he hasn't fit in well to the new way of doing things.
Right, and I think you're right that the health issue is one that I thought about too. Dick Cheney is another one that comes to mind.
Yes, I mean, 8 years ago, or no less, I think in 2004 election, I had a friend of mine who was a doctor who was trying to convince me that Cheney had a personality change after undergoing heart surgery, which is indeed part of the medical literature. So maybe that.
Right. No, I think Cheney clearly did. I knew Cheney pretty well in the 80s and 90s, and he's a different figure now than he was then. Just full stop.
Right, and people might be saying that about Bill Clinton.
Exactly. So I think that I think Hillary will be under enormous pressure to pick. Pardon me, Obama will be enormous pressure to pick Hillary, but.
Bill may be his escape hatch.
It's an unbelievable can of worms, and it would negate Obama's change message if he puts them back on the ticket.
Well, if he doesn't want her on the ticket, I say just give Bill a microphone. 20 minutes in a microphone, and that whole issue may go away. I don't want to go too deep into the Hillary vice president thing because as imaginative as we are, I'm not sure there's much more to be said about it.
Right.
But it's really overshadowed the talk about McCain and a running mate. I mean, he had that meeting a couple of weeks back with some potential contenders in Arizona, but there hasn't been much talk since then, has there?
No, and I mean,
is that odd? I mean,
it's the dominant media are much more interested in what goes on with the Democrats than they are with the Republicans. Although even if the Republicans have a way of actually winning the presidency,
oh, those poor Republicans.
No, well, as Bill Clinton can attest, sometimes it's better to be left alone without reporters, paying close attention to you.
But as a Republican observer of the political scene, have you observed anything?
Well, I mean, one point that's interesting is that meeting in Arizona where McCain invited Chris Romney and Mark Sanford, was it? I'm drawing a blank.
Maybe.
As a third, actually Mike Huckabee was invited to that and was on his Alaskan vacation cruise. And so I don't doubt for a second there'll be a lot more of those kind of sessions with McCain.
He wasn't too busy jamming with Ricky Skaggs.
Other names that are floating around are, Mike Bloomberg, Carly Fiorina, the former, president and CEO of Hewlett Packard.
But wasn't she? Wasn't she kind of forced out?
She was. She was totally forced out.
So what gives her standing to? Well, it's like she wasn't hailed as a great business leader and then left on her own terms.
I mean, well,
there are lots of problems.
She would probably say she was a great business leader.
I don't know if she would say that, but I'm sure she left hundreds of millions of dollars. But the media coverage, she came out the loser.
Right, I do agree with that. I think that one thing in the McCain mindset, there's a certain degree of kind of shock and stun and awe of the opposition, and that would suggest sort of a different kind of vice presidential selection, and especially if Obama passes on Hillary, and he picks
Hillary.
one would assume a man, then McCain. I could see the McCain people the way they think, saying, "Aha, here's our chance to kind of scoop up the Hillary Clinton vote with a female choice." And that could be again Carly Fiorina, that could be Senator Hutchison of Texas. There's a couple that come to mind here and there. It's a wide open thing.
And we should note to our viewers that nobody has to go first here.
Right.
I mean,
right.
They may each want to wait. Whoever goes second obviously has the advantage.
Right, and the Republican convention, of course, and this is sort of hard to get your head around. Yeah. Doesn't begin until September 1st. September 1st.
Yeah, the Democrats go first, and the Republicans begin right after that. Usually there's a week in between, but not even
so in other words, it's a late start, and so we've got June, July, August to sort of spin our wheels here, talking about all
Well,
this.
I don't know about you, but I'll be busy watching those town hall debates. And that was fascinating. No sooner had Obama clinched the nomination that John McCain offered up an invitation for 10 town hall style debates. I think before the conventions, there are 3. Right now, mainstream, debates scheduled for the fall that this presidential debating commission puts together. The candidates are not obligated to accept those invitations, but they tend to. But Kane's saying, we don't want those, or we don't want to wait for those. We want to get going right now with these town hall style debates. And the Obama campaign responded, well, that's an interesting idea. We prefer more Lincoln Douglas style debates. Now, do you know the difference between the two?
I don't actually. Maybe you do.
Well, let's. Here we like to enlighten, entertain, and educate. The Lincoln Douglas debates were held in 1858. They were a series of 7 debates in the great state of Illinois when Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas were running for Senate. In those days, common folks like you and I, Jim Pinkerton, did not get to vote directly for senators. What happened was you voted for your state legislature, a late legislator, and then the legislature chose the senator that they wanted to send to Washington. So if you were a member of the Democratic Party, you would vote for a Democrat, and the Democratic legislators would pick a Democrat. In that instance, Stephen Douglas was the Democrat, and Abraham Lincoln was running as a Republican. And there were, I think, 9 major counties or so, districts, maybe congressional districts, in Illinois at the time, and they had spoken already jointly in 2 before they started the series of debates. So they said, let's do 7, 1 in each district. And the format of those debates, I know you're dying to know, was one person would go first and speak for an hour. The next person would have an hour and a half. This is kind of like the World Series: 2 games, 3 games, 2 games, and then the first person would come back for a half an hour rejoinder, and that would be it. And there were no moderators, no questions from the audience, no email questions, no YouTube questioners,
no timers.
And by and large, they dealt with the big issue of the day: slavery. In fact, today when high school students participate in what's known as Lincoln Douglas style debates, they usually deal with big issues like, is there a God? Should we strive for social justice in our economic policy, rather than more mundane policy questions like, should there be universal health care?
Well, I think it would be great if they did all those kind of debates. I'm not sure. I mean, and I guess even people would watch. I mean, it would drive the networks crazy to have somebody going on for an hour and a half in one stretch. I mean, how would they do commercials or something? And Newt Gingrich has suggested this. He suggested having these debates, and I give him a lot of credit for putting an emphasis on this. I guess my hope would be that that they get a little more interesting than the debates have been in the past. I recall the Democrats had 19 of them. Yeah, is that right?
I often thought that the best way to do this would be sort of like one of those kickboxing contests. You just put 2 people in a room, with a TV camera, audience and no audience, and you say, go at it. Okay?
Well, I think that's right.
You have the barest amount of rules. You have, don't even have a moderator. Just, because if somebody starts filibustering, that will actually be to their disadvantage. Each candidate will have to sort of know how long to speak, show that they can interrupt politely, and make their points in the face of a pretty strong opponent, and let them sort of sort it out. And I think you'd learn a lot about the 2 individuals, how they think, how they deal with people, by watching them in such a setting.
I agree. I think it'd be fun. My only thing about the Democrats, it seemed to me that just the nature of the debates they had, they would ask the same question in 19 times, and it got pretty boring. Yeah. So I think one reform that I would volunteer, and of course, if we say it on Blogging Heads, it's sure to happen, is that they pick one big topic for each debate, and like Lincoln Douglas, of course, as you said, they're all slavery.
Mostly slavery.
But so pick one each for each discussion, and say, now we're going to talk about healthcare, now we're going to talk about income taxes, now we're going to talk about whatever. Mm-hmm. And I would even volunteer some ideas that I think that strike me as I observe McCain and Obama and their emerging platforms, is that they seem to sort of agree on issues. And I'm sort of puzzled over, maybe we could start something here on Blogging Heads where we say, look, as per the Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Silver Blaze, is not so much the things they do talk about, it's the things they don't talk about. It's the dog that doesn't bark.
That's the Sherlock Holmes. For those,
Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock
for those of our viewers.
Okay. Right. Okay. In any case, that short story, it's the dog that didn't bark.
That gives it away.
That gives it. For example, I mean, I am struck.
You have a few issues in mind.
I do. One that comes to mind is global warming. Both McCain and Obama, have endorsed pretty radical cap and trade legislation on CO2 emissions. That I think either one of them, Obama would say, look, I go further and do more than McCain, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I think even if the McCain legislation were ever to be enacted, it would shut down a good chunk of the U.S. economy, which I'm sure is what the environmentalists have in mind.
Oh, Jim, there you go again. Yes,
there you go again.
Global warming is just a hoax in order to find a way to shut down businesses.
I didn't say it was a hoax, but I said that but cap and trade as a Congressional Budget Office, which is controlled by the Democrats. It's not exactly the same thing as human events. Says that cap and trade is a $1.2 trillion with a T dollar tax increase. Now that would have an effect on the economy.
I guess if we shut down the Iraq War, we'd be net even then.
Well, as you know, I oppose the Iraq War. But the thing is,
listen, there are a lot of scientists out there too who also believe that the emissions that would be reduced for cap and trade will not solve the global warming problems, and that they will still set off a irreversible chain of events that will cause tremendous problems throughout the century. And
speaking of irreversible, I read in WorldNet Daily that the scientists have discovered that the temperature on Mars and Jupiter is rising dramatically as well. Now, how can you blame Exxon for that?
Well, listen. Now you're starting to sound like Fred Thompson here, who used to joke about that. That what are the Martians doing driving SUVs? The overwhelming science here, it's even George Bush now agrees with this, is that that there's human-induced global warming going on. It's serious, and it has to be redressed pretty damn soon, or we may lose control of our atmosphere. You can always find scientists who disagree, but that's the overwhelming consensus.
You're right.
And if you don't want to play by the odds, well, then you're playing at a tremendously high risk for all of us and for any little Pinkertons that come along down the road.
And I'm right. Very well put. Touche. But the issue, of course, is that if the Chinese are opening 2 coal-fired plants every week to a week.
No, we listen. We got to do what we can. We got to get the Chinese and the Indians,
the Chinese
and the Indonesians,
won't, David.
and
the Chinese have no intention of doing this.
Okay, well then we'll all just go to hell together.
Maybe we will. The point is, or maybe we'll have to go to nuclear power as an alternative,
which is an issue that John McCain is pretty hot on, which he was talking about the other day. But let's not get into we can have a whole Blogging Heads global warming special edition down the road. But you said there were other issues too.
Well, the other issues are immigration. It seems to me that McCain has now pretty much papered over the immigration debate, the debacle that nearly destroyed his campaign about a year ago today. And is now back to talking about comprehensive immigration reform and some kind of amnesty. And I'm sure Obama agrees with him.
So in terms of a presidential election, I mean, you disagree with that position. Are you just kind of, out of luck here? I mean, are you just going to be pulling what little hair you and I have left out in the next few months? Because there are these issues, which there just won't be a very fierce debate.
Well, I think that's part of the challenge. There will be members of Congress and journalists and everybody else and citizens groups that will rise up and say, listen, the elite consensus that unites Teddy Kennedy and John McCain and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton on issues like global warming or immigration is not, in fact, what the country wants.
I think you're wrong in global warming. The polling shows.
I guarantee, put it to a vote, and I guarantee it won't pass. Look what's happening in the
States. Look what Schwarzenegger's doing. Well, listen, that's what. Anyway, go ahead.
A few states, California can do it.
I feel your frustration.
But Alabama and Arkansas and North Dakota won't. And they have more senators than California does. Unjust as that might be in terms of population, the fact of the matter is that this country will not. I mean, it just won't. I mean, it won't happen. What'll be interesting is Obama and McCain chattering away about how they're going to fight global warming, and then it just won't get through the Senate. And I think the similar fate happens with immigration. I don't think that a comprehensive immigration reform, defined as amnesty, is going to get through the Senate next year.
But in terms of the debate, the presidential debate, these issues then will just sort of sit dormant.
I agree. It's crazy. And these are huge issues facing the country. And because McCain has this sort of
each party, after this, tremendously long process, has endorsed candidates, awarded them the nominations who have these positions.
I know it's one of the many paradoxes of our politics.
John McCain's global warming position and immigration position, which are opposed by a good number of Republicans, particularly on the immigration side. Listen, he still though he was out of sync, he still managed to win the nomination. While even though he was even attacked in those positions by credible candidates on Barack Obama's side, at least his stand on those positions reflect those from the party that he's representing.
I think even on global warming, I think you'll see a good chunk of Democrats saying, "Look, we're not going to go for this."
Well, it's only a majority position. Come on, look what.
No, I said a good chunk. I didn't say a majority. I said a good chunk. And no, you're right. And this is the crazy thing about McCain. McCain got the Republican nomination with a minority of Republicans. He won with independents. Well, those are the people that put him over.
Your man Mike Huckabee helped turn it into a three-person race, and
you're right. My man Mike Huckabee beat Romney in Iowa, and that probably opened the way for McCain to win New Hampshire. Because if Romney had won Iowa, he might well have sailed to the nomination. So this is just an interesting political science situation here, where this is not exactly the first time where the agent, the politician in power or would be in power, doesn't particularly represent the people who he or she purports to lead. And again, this is something that won't, for the reasons you said, won't get sorted out in 2008, but will come to a huge reckoning in 2009 and thereafter, when the elites who are totally confident that whether it's Obama or McCain...
Jim, you keep predicting that there's going to be a revolt against the elites. I don't know which zip code you live in, but perhaps you should put up a fence around your own house. Do you really believe this is going to happen?
Well, I don't... Okay, I'll just bet you that neither cap and trade nor comprehensive immigration reform get through the Senate in 2009.
Well, let's see what the composition of the Senate is after November 5th.
I'll bet you no matter what the composition is.
I'll take that bet on November 5th.
Okay, all right.
But you saw the movie Iron Man recently.
I did.
Also affected your thinking in some of this.
It greatly affected my thinking. As everybody knows, Iron Man is a big hit movie starring Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow.
We give it, blogging, it's 2 thumbs up. Give it a thumb up.
It's a commercial success because not only is it a comic book that kids like, but it's actually got a pretty good script, and so it's done well.
Right.
But as I was watching the movie, it's about a guy who's flying around in sort of a suit that is like armored, bulletproof, and
Yeah, he doesn't have superpower. It's all in the clothes.
Exactly. It's all in the clothes make the man
right.
here. I thought to myself, why don't we have that? for the U.S. military.
Wait a second. There was a Seinfeld episode when they wondered why there were no flying cars by now. Because when you and I were kids, they promised us flying cars and guys in jetpacks, all over the place, and it just didn't come to be.
You're right. I was watching the movie Blade Runner the other night, which is set in 2019. The movie was made in 1982, starring Harrison Ford, directed by Ridley Scott.
Right.
And they imagine in 2019 they're flying cars all over Los Angeles. Now, 2019 is not that far away from our present day, and yet we're nowhere near flying cars. I think that's been a major failure of engineering and transportation.
We can't even get them to build cars that get 40 miles per gallon, and you want flying cars?
And a major victory for trial lawyers, who I'm sure have sort of used litigation and liability.
You want trial lawyers to get a boost?
I don't want them to get a boost. I'm saying
if you do, give them flying cars.
I know, that's the point. That's my point. They know that too, which is why they haven't happened, because everybody understands the liability would look. Nobody would dare have a flying car because the trial lawyers would kill them. Well, again, you laugh, but the point is actually it would make the world better if we could all fly around. It would just be faster, among other things.
More fun.
And more fun. James Fallows, the former chairman of the New America Foundation, he wrote a whole book about what he called free flight about 8 years ago. in which he said, look, this is an obvious technological leap to make, and we're not making it because the combination of, well, he didn't say this, but I'm saying this, the combination of trial lawyers and environmentalists have crushed a lot of the potential innovation to be had in transportation. But leaving transportation is another issue we can talk about. But
you really have environmentalists on the brain today, Jim.
I think that
they're just stop. They're going to. They want to drag the economy down, and they want to prevent you from zipping about in a flying car.
I think they do. I think that Václav Klaus, the president of the Czech Republic, wrote a very profound book that should have gotten a lot more attention than it did, called Blue Planet, Green Shackles. That I think everybody should read. I think they should see that the environmental movement in its political incarnation, has every intention of doing its best to turn us into hobbits and deindustrializing the world. That's their goal. Now, you can make an argument for it if it weren't for the fact that we'd be then conquered by the Chinese or the South Koreans.
If they hadn't been environmentalists, if they hadn't been Rachel Carson and others going back over the years, we'd be living in the filth that they live in China now. Do you want to? I don't want athletes who just and reporters and others who don't want to go to China. I just spoke to a friend who came back from China and felt sick the whole time she was there. I mean, that's if you'd taken away environmentalists out of American history, I think that's where the robber barons and the capitalists and the industrialists that create all these wonderful jobs you like to tout would have us living.
No, I don't think that's right. I think that corporate America is actually pretty conscious of clean air and clean water because they have to live in it.
We had to pass laws.
Well, you're right,
to
we
make
did,
these things
and now they're happy with them. My concern is
so the environmentalists were good when they passed these laws, but now they're causing the problems.
Well, like a lot of things, you can take a good idea too far. Okay. One dessert is good, 10 desserts are bad. Cleaning things up is good, and a profound deindustrialization. An example of a book that very much impressed me was James Howard Kunstler's new book about imagining the deindustrialized. I think it's called The Handmade World, a world made by hand. That's it, a world made by hand. Again, if this is a great paean to, living in Vermont with wooden shoes and reading by candlelight. That's a kind of a romantic aesthetic.
Given where gas prices are going, you may get your wish one way or the other.
Right. It's in any case, it's not where America needs to be, and what we should be doing is pushing ahead with clean technologies that actually get things like improve infrastructure and get us, and also help us win wars. Because I just would remind you that back to Iron Man, that the military has suffered from a serious lack of imagination.
Well, their whole procurement process has been totally, destroyed and weighted and politically oriented. So they waste billions of dollars on weaponry that they don't even ask for because it's in the interest of Trent Lott or some other senator to get contracts in their district. I mean, you have to there. It's just completely.
And so what's needed? I mean, again, what's needed is a movie like our popular imagination that says, look, it is crazy to be fighting wars with. GIs riding up and down, dusty roads in Iraq, in Humvees that get blown up every week or so, or every day or so. That's just not the way to do this. America as a constabulary army in the Middle East makes no sense. We should have been investing
we need robots.
We need robots and UAVs and anything else we could be, and lasers and satellites and so on. I mean, this is what high-tech countries do. If the Japanese are planning on using using robots to replace their entire healthcare, personal home care workers with robots. Well, there's a lesson there in terms of supplementing your labor force and including your military force with technology. It's cheaper and it's less costly, including in the most precious resource of all.
But I don't think environmentalists are standing in the way of robotic nurses.
No, they're not. They're not standing in the way of robotic nurses, but they are standing in the way of use of electricity, and the use of what they want to do.
Well, they want to use our high tech imaginations and apply them to finding the best and most effective sources of sustainable energy.
But they're even opposed to that.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. They're opposed to wind power. They're opposed to Teddy Kennedy and John Kerry opposed those windmills off the coast of Massachusetts. And the environmentalists in California are opposed to using solar panels because they don't want the transmission lines going through.
No, you're talking about NIMBY. No, right back.
That's right.
Okay,
NIMBY.
The environmental movement if you talk about environmentalists with a capital E, most of them are in favor of these very sort of programs that you like, and they want more funding, and they're fighting for more of this.
Except when it actually comes to building it.
Well, you can pick.
They're for it in theory and against it in practice.
You're picking a few examples of individuals who don't want something in their own backyard.
And where is Sierra Club and the NRDC and the EDF and so on denouncing these NIMBYs for doing this?
Actually, I think there's been a big fight in Massachusetts over this.
But there has been a big fight, but they lost.
They wanted it, and Ted Kennedy used his clout. And we now have to say we're happy to hear that Ted Kennedy did fine this week with his surgery, though he was wrong on the wind towers. You and I agree.
And he was also wrong about Chappaquiddick, but we'll let.
Oh, come on, low blow, Jim, low blow. Okay, before we take off, because you probably have wedding plans. You got to pick up your tux today or something.
I got rehearsal dinners or whatever, rehearsal lunches or rehearsal breakfasts.
And toast to write and flowers to put in vases. But you, South Africa, violence.
Oh, well, I was
a story that I didn't follow.
I just was struck by, again, this issue of immigration is, I mean, in South Africa, a country that very different from the United States, they're having terrible convulsions over immigration. Violence, and they're killing each other over this, and there's been sort of pogroms, to put it bluntly. And I guess that just is another reminder that immigration is a worldwide phenomenon and a worldwide source of vexation to populations. And when you read in the front page of the New York Times today that the hospitals in Los Angeles are being overwhelmed. And of course, the New York Times is too PC to mention that a big source strain on the hospital system in Los Angeles is immigration. When you read in the LA Times a few days ago that chickens are making a big comeback because people who come from third world countries naturally have chickens in their front yard. We are engaged again. Obama and McCain are completely united in this goal of expanding the third world population in the United States. And I think this has got horrible implications for income equality and social solidarity and the social safety net here in the United States. And yet nobody's talking about it. And we merely need to look overseas to see the more serious consequences of the exact same policies that we're using here.
Well, I think what's happening in Europe is probably even, in some ways, is a more telling case.
You're right. That's also more telling. But I'm saying the more recent example is South Africa, where who would have thought that in Africa the presence of Zimbabweans.
But I don't. I think you're being a little bit hyperbolic when you say it's the goal of McCain and Obama to expand the third world within the United States.
Well, they want guest workers. What's the guest worker program?
They don't want to throw people out who are here.
No, they want to go further than that. McCain wants a guest worker program. I'm not sure about Obama, but I'm sure you could be talking.
But I think one of the things I would add to your list is as something as a separate category to immigration is U.S.-Mexico relations. It was actually interesting how Bush, campaigned in 2000. That was a pretty big deal to him, and it was actually one of the few issues where he seemed to have, a touch for it, feel for it, and actually cared about, given that he'd been governor of Texas and had a pre-existing relationship with the Mexican government. And 9/11 pretty much put the kibosh on that. And to me, it's an issue that extends beyond immigration, because it's certainly in our interest, in part because of immigration matters, to have a functioning and healthy and thriving state to ourselves. And Mexico has just become, again, outside of talk about the Mexicans who are here, and occasionally 60-minute pieces about the tragic drug war there, is more or less a forgotten country. In terms,
well, you're right. It's not for lack of trying on Bush's part. I agree with you that 9/11 killed the prospects for an open border with Mexico. It killed the prospects for open borders in a lot of places, because we realized that national security.
Well, I'm not sure about open border. I think it just really turned the emphasis away from even trying to engage with Mexico.
But remember, Bush tried to do that. Bush tried twice. he made major efforts on immigration, as he
on
called it,
immigration,
reform,
you're right. But I think
in 2004 and 2007, and was defeated both times.
We need to look at
Bush was completely oblivious to the national security and sort of national integrity issues raised by 9/11, and did it anyway.
My point is we need to look at Mexico beyond the immigration debate.
Well,
and that would probably, and if we had some success on other fronts with Mexico, it might even help us with this vexing immigration debate, which unfortunately won't be happening between now and November 4th. And
but wouldn't you? I mean, in Iraq, we pretty much say, look, we can't positively affect their politics. So what would we possibly do to affect Mexican politics?
Well, we had this little thing called NAFTA, which
are you for NAFTA?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Neither am I.
So, which I think had the wrong impacts and set up the wrong set of incentives, which has exacerbated the immigration issue.
And yet another issue, I suppose that I would imagine. I'm not. McCain was for NAFTA. Obama. You can tell me you're covering these things more closely than I am. What's Austin Goolsby's temperature on NAFTA?
I think on CAFTA and the more recent trade agreements, they disagree. Obama has called for reevaluation of NAFTA and for not doing the same elsewhere. And McCain has talked about free trade as if it's an article of faith. So I think that is actually one area, particularly when the issue of working class voters comes to bear, that there will be a healthy and vigorous debate.
But what's Austin Goolsby's position on free trade? Who's Austin Goolsby?
Well, he's one of many economic advisors to Obama, the way that each candidate, and you know this, you worked on campaigns, have multiple advisors, and Goolsby, was caught up, as we know, earlier this campaign season, allegedly telling the Canadian consulate in Chicago, not even the embassy, that Obama was talking tougher on NAFTA than he actually believed. Now, it's unclear to me exactly what he said or whether that was even an accurate reflection of Obama's position. But if you look at what Obama has said and what's up on his website, and you compare it to what John McCain has said and what's up on his website, there's a pretty clear and cut and dry difference representing basically the anti-NAFTA, fair trade position of Democrats versus the Republican free trade position, which is not just Republican. That was obviously Bill Clinton's position back in the 90s. So I think that is an issue that where there may be this debate that will be lacking on other fronts. So, Jim, that's the good news today.
That is good. I hope they devote a whole debate to that topic. That would be very interesting and interest to a lot of Americans.
A debate on globalization, I think you and I would be quasi-riveted by.
Right.
So with that, speaking of riveting events, your wedding happens this weekend. So again, we wish you well. Many happy returns.
Thank you, all Blogging Heads TVers.
And once the celebration is over, and you've
recovered, we'll be back in our harnesses, back for the greater glory of Bob Wright and his empire of media.
Right. Our blessings.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Thanks, David. All right. Bye-bye.